Hello everybody, welcome to the Kenny Hack. Gonna be another long video today going over a lot of tips, tricks, setups, how-tos, going over a little MDF puzzle piece, and a lot of stuff to cover. So please enjoy. First tip I have for you is you might have noticed in some of my last few videos that I have grounding wires onto the frames of my Tours. Now I had to put those on because I have such dry air. I live up in Montana. In the winter, the air gets super dry, builds up a lot of static in the air. So as my head was moving back and forth, I was constantly hearing a little static pop. And a couple times it was enough of a static discharge that it would actually flicker my computer screen. So I hooked up these grounding wires. Right now I just got little open fork spade connecting the 20 watt to my 15 watt. Then in the back there I got a gator clip, and that runs up to the coax plugs on my power strip. Now I wasn't sure if those would be grounded properly, but I just put it on there first to try it out. If that wouldn't have worked, I was going to get a metal wall plate for my power outlet, and you basically can get a spade like one of these and pinch it in behind your metal wall plate. The center screw of your wall plate that holds the face cover on is hooked into the grounding system of the power outlets. So as long as you got something metal wedged into that plate to ground your system, it should have worked. But luckily it was good enough that the outside housing of the coax should be grounded. So I was pretty sure that was going to work, and it did work fine. And since I've hooked that up, I haven't had any kind of static discharge problems. I've talked to a few people now that have said static discharges have either shorted out their circuit boards on their machine. One guy I talked to, he said it actually sent enough static back to his MacBook that it burnt out his MacBook power source. So just as a precaution, I'd say even if you've never heard any static discharge problems, get your machine grounded. It's not going to hurt, and it might save your machine from damaging itself some point down the road. Tip number 2. When you order an Tour, you're going to get one of these things sent with it. This is a wiring loom. You put your wires, you open it up, put your wires in here, and you can use it to snake your wires through the shrouding cord there. And this gets asked about every day in the forums what this thing is for. And you're going to get a lot of flack if you're a new person, and this is the first question you ask in the forums is, what is this thing? It's kind of become a running joke now because it gets asked so often. So that's what these are. They're really only used, I think, on the 7-watt model. I don't think the wires come pre-ran. I don't know if that's still the situation, but even though you don't need it to start with, hold on to it. You might need it in the future. So that's what these are. Tip number 3. I recently just made these little feet holders, and I'm not too worried about the machine moving. These are mostly just to help keep my orientation to my coaster grid, just so I could maybe set it up quicker. But after thinking about it for a while, at the speeds I run, these probably really aren't recommended of clamping your feet in. The reason behind that is these Tours have a G sensor a G-force sensor built into them that if the machine starts moving too much, it'll shut itself down, and that's to protect itself from damage. And if you have the feet clamped in, that might trick the system to think it's not moving and everything's running fine, and your machine might be sitting there violently changing directions that should be shutting it down. So if you're going to be running at these higher speeds like I run, I really don't recommend clamping the feet in. That's having that G-force sensor stop the machine. That will be what tells you if you have your project set up properly. Like, I've been running at super high speeds for months now, and I've never tripped out that G-force sensor. The only time I've ever done it is when I bumped the table, and that stopped it. You know, other than that, once you learn how to properly set up your projects with the overscan, these things should run smooth enough. There never should be any huge bumps going on when it's changing directions. So, like I said, if you're going to run the high speeds like I try to run, I'd really recommend unbolting it from the hold downs. Like, I've gotten so used to lining up to that grid manually, it only takes me a few minutes to get the machine lined up back to that grid. It's once you do it a couple times, get a method down of lining up on the first corner, and come into the second corner. You might have to go back and forth a couple times. Once you're lined up on them first two corners, you hit the shift frame key, let it run around, make sure you're staying on all the lines pretty good, and then you're ready to go. It doesn't take that much time versus the risk of what damage might be caused by bolting the whole frame down. Now, if you go back to like my first videos where I was first started running at these high speeds, I did have the frame clamped in because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how this machine would act at these super high speeds. But after I seen how smooth the machine can run when you're with your overscan setup, I pretty much quit worrying about clamping it in. Or you can watch on the high speed time lapses, that machine isn't walking around anywhere where the little foam pads that they have on the feet are sticky enough to the wood that seems to hold it in place just fine. So, my recommendation on that. The next tip I have, if you've got a brand new machine and you've made sure all your belts are tight and everything's lined up good, you can run some photos or small print jobs and making sure you're not getting any funny lines and making sure the rollers aren't acting funny. But even when you have a brand new machine, you might get an occasional little skip or where it double passes, and it almost will form a repetitive pattern as it's going across the workpiece. I think that what that is when your belts are brand new, it takes them a little bit of time for them to wear in and match the tooth pattern on the rollers. And you might get like one tooth in the roller that's just slightly different shaped, and it kind of hangs up on the belt tooth, and it causes the stepper just to hang up for like 1 pixel's worth of movement, and it will create a little burn skip on your image. Now, I kind of thought of this after I've been running on this for a while, but what might help eliminate that quicker is in Lightburn, draw up a big box about the whole size of your work area, set it to fill, and have it run first on the 0 scan angle, back and forth. Set it at like 2,000 or 3,000 millimeters per minute, whatever you're comfortable with, and just let that machine run back and forth for like an hour. And you can put a sacrificial piece of cardboard in here, set it at a low power, and you can see if it's burning in, like you'll see this little 2 millimeter wide pattern or so, like the width of the tooth. You'll see like these little consistent pattern going across your image, and I'm pretty sure that's how the teeth are wearing in. And it seems like once you get these belts broken in, once they've worn in to match the teeth on the roller, that little pattern kind of disappears. So we're kind of trying to help break the belt in. So if you have that big fill box, let it run on that 0 angle for like an hour, just wearing that belt in. Hopefully it'll wear them teeth in to match. And then flip it to a 90-degree scan angle and run vertically for an hour or so. Just let it run. And hopefully that'll help break your belts in quicker and kind of, it's very rare you're going to use that whole section. Most all your work is done right in the middle. And that's where you can be making really good projects, and then all of a sudden you get to a big project and you get up to like the very end extreme of it, and all of a sudden you start getting these little belt tooth patterns, and it's probably because the very ends of your belt just haven't been used very much, so they really haven't got worn in yet. So it might be a good idea just to, when you got some free time and you kind of done playing for a little bit, making stuff, just set it to run in a little pattern and help break them belts in when you first get new belts put on. So, and now for an update on where I'm at with my pre-treatment of wood products. I'm kind of trying out about a 3-part blend, trying to come up with something that gets me the best results all around. So basically I just get a standard solo cup. I've got a quart jar that's made up of my Kenny Hack solution. It's just the cleaning vinegar and the steel wool, and it's a pure concentrate. I never diluted it with water. I just pretty much filled it 90% full with the vinegar, threw in the one steel wool pad, and let it break down. And that's my concentrate. From that, I take about 3 good tablespoons of that concentrate, and I'll dilute it into about a 50% full glass. That's my starter. And then from there, I either add in some of this white watercolor ink. Might put like 2 or 3 eyedroppers full of that in, because this dilutes easily into water. I haven't got to try it out yet, but it's on the list of things to try. I'm going to try, instead of using the ink, I'm going to try using the poster board paint that I used in the whitewash video. Maybe mix in like a tablespoon of that in with it. That just helps lighten up the staining effect, and the white paint particles kind of help turn it black versus more of a sepia color of a burn. And I'm also throwing in like about 1 tablespoon of baking soda into that mix, because this stuff does help burn blacker. Now on my standard or my stock 20 watt, like you've seen in my comparison video, apples to apples, this thing wasn't burning at the highest speeds as what just my straight solution was, but that was a very higher strength solution than what I'm burning with now. That very easily turns anything black when you burn with it. But the key with these solutions is you're not just trying to burn everything black. You're just trying to get to the edge of black at a decent power range. You don't want to be running everything at 85-90% power to do it. Hopefully you can find a good mix where you're able to achieve good results at like 40 to 50% power. You're not putting a heavy load on your laser. So that's, and you can get kind of carried away with this stuff. You think, well, if a little's good, a lot's better. And it will help, it'll turn everything black on your image, but generally that's all soot. And as soon as you go to brush it off, all your details are going to brush away. As soon as you apply a clear coat, all that soot dissolves into the clear coat and all your details disappear. So your goal is to try to get a blend in a power and speed setting to where you're just barely hitting that full black mark. And that's where I always say, do a smudge test, rub your finger, find the blackest part of the deal. Hopefully you do this on your demo pieces before you do your final burn to check your power rating. And if you can smudge your finger across it and it's just coming out solid black, you're running too hot. All them details are going to disappear when you brush it off or when you apply your clear coat to seal it. So that's the power test you're shooting for. So I'm trying to come up with what gives the darkest color with the least amount of soot. That's what we're trying to avoid, is that soot. So I don't have it mastered yet or perfected. I don't think anything with laser work is ever going to be perfected. You're just going to have to be happy with the results you're getting. But I'm still trying different blends, trying different things. I'm probably a little biased towards my original solution, just because if I wouldn't have stumbled onto that, I'd have never learned that we can run these machines a lot faster than what everybody thought was possible. So I'm kind of biased towards that. I'll probably never get away from it, but it doesn't mean you have to try everything with it. If you find something I've heard of people using old tea bags, diluted coffee, cornstarch, pretty much any kind of stain applied to your wood will help burn on the darker end of the spectrum. Most of them just have trouble with the light end of the grayscale. And even the baking soda, it works, but when I've tried it, it struggles on the lower end of the grayscale. And that's where the homemade solution I use, that aging stain, it's still the best one I found for getting results down at that very low end of the power where it's just barely firing and it still gets some of the burn put onto the wood. So that's why I just don't go away from it. Okay, now we're going to be getting into the main topic of this one. This is an MDF pre-printed or pre-cut puzzle board. I found these pretty cheap online. I think I got a 3-pack of them for, I'm pretty sure it was under $10. And I just was cruising around and found them and ordered them to give a try. Haven't really done much on MDF yet. But you can see it turned out very well. And we're going to be going over all the settings on how I set this. And this is something that I probably can put on my page of list of stuff to sell. At the speed I got these things done, I think it could be an easy money maker, but we'll get to it all. Show you kind of how I added some settings, some tricks I found into making these look a little bit better. And so stick around. Hopefully I cover all the information that's useful for you. But let's get into it. So first I brought the photo into GIMP. And like I've done in other videos, I'm going to go through it quick because I've showed this many times. Just bring it in, go to Scale Image. I set the resolution to 200. I'm trying to see how low a DPI I can get to now and still produce good results. So I used to always run 254. This one I tried 200. And I set the size. I wanted 8 inches tall and it come out little under 11.5 inches wide. So basically the size of a standard sheet of paper. Hit scale. Then you just hit export as. And then I'd put in the save results that it's an 8x12 at 200 DPI and it's saved as a JPEG. You'd hit export and then save it as the 100% deal. going to skip over that part. So then you would import it into Lightburn. And with these 15 watts, running plug-in scripts, in my opinion, on everything I've tried so far, is a waste of time. These things have such a smaller focal point than what the stock 20 watts have, that grayscale so far works phenomenally on everything I've tried it on. And so you're not trying to do any plug-ins, any dithering. When I ran this, I didn't even change any shape properties. I brought it straight in, and you can basically adjust your black levels and your white levels with just how you set the grayscale power. So for this project, I didn't change anything. Normally I play around with these a lot to kind of help trick the laser into burning hotter or burning more towards the black side or more towards the white side, depending on if I'm doing tile or if I'm doing wood. But on this one, I ran it at 7,000 millimeters per minute at 40% on the max power and 10% on the minimum power. Ran it at 200 DPI, and I ran it on the 90-degree scan angle. Now, I don't know if there is a big difference on these 15 watts between the 0 angle and the 90-degree angle. I'm a creature of habit. I ran so long on the 90-degree on my 20 watt. It's just my preference now. So I'm still running 90 degrees on this 15 watt, but it might not really be necessary. If you like running on the 0, stay on the 0. But then I ran it on the grayscale. And also, you want to have your overscan turned on at 7,000. It needs a little bit of room. And usually about 4% or so just gives it a little bit of extra time to turn around. So we'll leave it at that. Now, if you come to the preview, it's taking just on over an hour. And with that overscan, it's a little more than an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It's a pretty good sized image. With that DPI and that speed, it's running very fast. It's like if you could turn out a photo sheet size in an hour, now your products are becoming very affordable and a better price and a better margin for your customers. You're only going to be able to sell stuff at a certain price. So the quicker you can get them done, more of them turned out, the more profitable you'll be. Now, and you can see, like I said in other videos, 7,000 is kind of the limit for running grayscale. The difference between 7,000 and 9,000 is about maybe just under 15 minutes of difference in time. So it's not that huge a time savings to run up that extra speed even. It's a little bit, if you're turning out a lot of projects, it might make a difference. But, you know, if you're running down there in the 2,000 range, say if you're doing the old low and slow technique, well, now this same project would take you almost 4 hours. So in the time you're doing that, running at the higher speeds, you could turn out 4 of these projects. And if they're all selling for the same price, now you've just quadrupled your profit margin. So that is why learning how to run at speed and kind of getting comfortable with it can really help you make money. If this is you're trying to set up a small little side business with these low budget lasers, they can really perform well for their price. So those are all my standard settings. So here's one of these boards blank. When you get them, I don't know if everybody's supplier is going to be like this, but this had a lot of scorch marks on the front. You could see everywhere where the laser had stopped to put in a little tag. What I found works best is to pop all this out. It usually stays in one piece. We'll see if I can get it. So you flip it over, and they still had some scorching problems, but the line pattern on the jigsaw pieces is a lot smaller. They're obviously focused to the bottom depth of this board when they cut it, so the front had a lot more pronounced lines. Now you can just take a piece of sandpaper and sand off all them scorch marks. Then I sanded off. Now this is the big thing to remember, is sand off both sides. Treat both sides exactly the same, and you're effectively turning this backside into your practice piece. And this is what I do with all of my wood products, is I treat the back the same as I do the front. And then I run a bunch of test burns on the back side before I burn the front. And that will greatly increase the likelihood that you're going to get a good burn. You can run all the little test panels you want, but nothing really tells you if you have good settings, as well as just burning the image you're going to burn and checking your numbers. That's, once you get it dialed in, your standard numbers might always be close, but you might have to tweak something up and down. You might have to play a little bit with the shape properties to really dial it into what you want. So always, show you why you want to treat both sides exactly the same. This here was the very first one I tried running. It still looks pretty good, but it's, in comparison, it's way darker. And what I forgot to do is I sanded this side, treated it, then it treated the back side, but I forgot to sand this back side. So when I applied my pre-treatment, it doesn't look like it's hardly doing anything on this MDF, but it is soaking into the wood. I put it on, dried off all the excess, blow dried it, come in here, ran a test strip. My numbers were looking really good. I was really happy with it. Flipped it over, ran it, and it come out way darker. And that was because I sanded it, and more of the stains soaked into that sanded surface than it did the original surface. So it was more reactive to the laser. This one was running at 55% and 10% on the bottom. And after sanding it and coming back to run the second one, I sanded the back on this one and found that I could go clear down to 40% and still get good detail. Now, honestly, these things looked way better before I clear coated them. Clear coating, it doesn't seem to matter what kind of clear coat you use, it's always going to affect the color of the wood. And sure enough, when I applied the clear coat, it kind of turned it from white to a little more of a sepia brown. And so you always kind of lose some of the details a bit. So be prepared for that. But I still think it's better to lose a little details and get some kind of sealer on there so it's not so easy to smudge it. And like I said, this one come out very, very dark still, but I wasn't able to smudge hardly anything off. I mean, it come out very clean. This here was about the darkest area, and I didn't have any problems with a lot of smudge. So I knew when I sprayed it, I wasn't going to be losing a lot of details. It would just be the color change of applying the clear coat. So that's something to try to do with all your projects, and that's why I prefer like real wood blanks. That's why I use these basswood slabs that you can get at most of any of the craft stores and hobby stores. Since they're real wood, front and back, they're identical. and they're both sides are pre-sanded, ready to go. So you can just stain up both sides, use your back as a practice piece, get your numbers dialed in, flip it over, your focus should stay the same. You make all your mistakes on the back side. And then flip it over, run your finished product, and you're going to be way happier with it. You shouldn't have any big surprises. As long as you don't forget like I did and not treat the back in the exact same process as you did the front. And that's also why I'm starting to put everything I'm going to treat all into one application. Because that way, I think it's easier to get both sides treated the same. Another good habit is to count how long a time you're spreading that material around. So if it takes you 30 seconds to evenly cover the front, and then I dry off the excess and I blow dry it dry, and then I flip it over, take the same amount of time applying it onto the back, spreading it out, trying to get the same kind of even coat, and then wipe off the excess and blow dry it. Now hopefully you've done everything you possibly can to try to get the front and the back the same. And that's what's really going to help your final products be more consistent. It might take you an extra 15-20 minutes of playing around, burning some little test strips. And I always try to run test strips across the faces. That's the most important area, like in photos like this, that you're trying to get the best detail you can. Nobody cares as much if the dress comes out perfect. So you want their faces to be as good as you can get. So that's all my test strips were right in this area. That's what I was trying to dial in on. So hopefully them are a lot of tips and tricks. Hopefully you kind of learned some extra stuff today. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Be sure to hit that bell down in the bottom right corner there so you get notified whenever I put out a new video. Don't want to miss anything. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.